I didn't wake up one morning and decide to disappear from their lives. There was no dramatic rupture, no final argument that echoed through the house, no declaration of independence. If anything, it unfolded so quietly that even I didn't notice it at first. The calls became shorter, then less frequent, then optional, until one day I realized I hadn't called in weeks, and the absence didn't feel like loss. It felt like error. For most of my life, calling them had been automatic, a reflex, something I did before thinking, the way you check the weather before leaving the house. It wasn't driven by longing or closeness. It was driven by obligation disguised as love. That distinction took years to form and even longer to accept. Growing up, I learned early that harmony was more important than truth. Emotions were allowed, but only certain ones, expressed in certain ways at certain times. Discomfort was treated like a malfunction. If something hurt me, the focus quickly shifted to why I felt that way, not what caused it. My reactions were examined more closely than their actions. I internalized that pattern so deeply that it became my default lens. I didn't know the word gaslighting back then. I didn't need it. I simply learned to doubt myself efficiently. If my memory didn't align with theirs, mine was wrong. If my feelings disrupted the mood, they were excessive. If I felt unseen, I was being dramatic. Over time, I stopped trusting my internal signals and started relying on external approval to tell me who I was. From the outside, we looked like a functional family. No shouting, no chaos, no obvious cruelty. That's what made it so confusing. People assume damage has to be loud to be real, but quiet erosion is far more effective. It doesn't alert you, it reshapes you. As an adult, I told myself I had outgrown it. I was independent, capable, self-aware. I maintained contact. I visited, I called, I listened. I played my role well. And every interaction ended the same way, me feeling subtly diminished, slightly disoriented, unsure why. Mini hooks appeared long before the distance did. Moments when I replayed conversations afterward, trying to figure out what had just happened. Why a neutral comment left me defensive. Why a simple boundary felt like rebellion. Why I apologized instinctively, even when no harm had been done. I told myself this was normal family friction. Everyone has it, but my body knew something my mind was still negotiating. I felt calmer when we didn't speak. My shoulders dropped. My thoughts slowed. I slept better. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt clean. That realization frightened me more than conflict ever had. I began noticing patterns I had previously ignored. How conversations circled back to their perspectives, their sacrifices, their disappointments. How my life updates were filtered through comparison or correction. How any attempt at emotional honesty was subtly reframed as accusation or ingratitude. The message was never explicit, but it was consistent. Closeness required compliance. I questioned myself constantly. Was I being unfair? Overly sensitive? Was I rewriting the past to justify distance? That doubt was familiar. It had always been there, quietly shaping my decisions. Even now, as an adult, I was still negotiating my reality with voices that no longer needed to be present to be powerful. Somewhere in the middle of this internal conflict, I encountered reflections, not instructions, not condemnation about emotional boundaries within families. About how some relationships don't end with explosions, but with exhaustion. About how constant self-editing eventually leads to self-erasure. These ideas didn't tell me to leave. They simply described what happens when you stay too long in a dynamic that requires you to shrink. I didn't announce my withdrawal. I didn't explain myself. I just stopped initiating. And that's when something unexpected happened. Nothing happened. No concern, no curiosity, no questions about my silence. Only occasional comments, lightly framed, as if my absence were a minor inconvenience rather than a rupture. That absence of reaction hit harder than anger ever could have. It revealed something I hadn't fully grasped before. I had always been the bridge, the emotional laborer, the one maintaining connection. Without my effort, the relationship didn't collapse. It simply thinned. Many hooks turned inward again. I felt guilt without accusation, responsibility without request. I realized how deeply I had internalized the role of emotional regulator. Even in absence, I was still managing imaginary reactions, anticipating disappointment that never arrived. The erosion became visible in hindsight. I saw how much energy I had spent translating myself, softening truths, buffering emotions that were never mine to manage. I saw how little space there had been for my own internal consistency. I had been present, but not whole. The psychological revirovolta didn't arrive as liberation. It arrived as clarity. In the final quarter of this story, the truth surfaced quietly but decisively. Their power over me was not rooted in authority, control, or dominance. It was rooted in access. They hadn't lost control because I confronted them. They lost relevance because I stopped offering myself as emotional material. Without proximity, their narratives couldn't override my perception. Their reinterpretations couldn't replace my memory. Their disappointment couldn't dictate my worth. The dynamic didn't end because they changed. It ended because I did. That realization was devastating in its simplicity. I had spent years fearing retaliation, guilt, rejection. What actually happened was absence. And in that absence, I found myself intact. There was no dramatic ending, no closure conversation, no apology exchanged. The reframing happened internally. I understood that I hadn't abandoned them. I had stopped abandoning myself. Distance wasn't punishment. It was preservation. Looking back, the entire story rearranges itself. The day I stopped calling them wasn't an act of rebellion. It was the first day I trusted my own reality without negotiation. If this reflection resonates, if you recognize the quiet confusion of loving people who slowly erode your sense of self, there is a thoughtful guide that explores these patterns with clarity and compassion, without blame or drama. You can download the ebook in the description. The link is in the description.